Carlos Alcaraz had always been the golden boy of tennis, basking in the limelight like a rock star on tour. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the absolute media circus that erupted when whispers of his alleged romance with EMMA RADUCANU started making the rounds. The news spread like wildfire across social media, setting fan pages ablaze, sending journalists into a frenzy, and leaving even fellow players raising their eyebrows in disbelief. This wasn't just a casual fling between two up-and-coming stars. Oh no, this was the kind of plot twist that made people sit up and clutch their popcorn. Two of the sport's brightest talents, colliding in a way nobody saw coming. At first, the rumors were just that, barely audible murmurs. A few exchanged glances at tournaments, some casual chit-chat during press conferences, and a handful of seemingly innocent interactions that, of course, the internet turned into a full-blown romantic saga. Both Alcaraz and Raducanu had been thrust into the spotlight at an absurdly young age, carrying the crushing weight of expectations on their shoulders. Maybe that's what pulled them toward each other. Who else could truly understand the insane pressure, the brutal sacrifices, and the relentless pursuit of greatness? But what really fueled the public's obsession? Their personalities. Carlos, the fiery Spanish powerhouse, overflowing with energy and passion, sprinting around the court like a man possessed. Emma, the enigmatic, cool-headed tactician, her elegant composure disguising a steely determination. It was a classic opposites attract scenario, and the world was eating it up. Then came the Australian Open, where things escalated from, interesting, to, holy sh*t, this is happening. Observers noticed how Emma would suddenly be present during Carlos's matches, her expressions shifting with every point he won or lost. The fans, those relentless social media detectives, began connecting the dots at warp speed. And then, the moment that sent the internet into cardiac arrest. A courtside camera caught Carlos flashing a grin at Emma after sealing a hard-fought victory. Was it admiration? A flirtatious glance? Was he just happy to see her? Who the hell knew? But that single image was enough to send Twitter into full meltdown mode. At first, both Carlos and Emma played it cool, dodging questions with the ever-classic, "We're just good friends." Yeah, sure. But the signs were impossible to ignore. Emma was spotted at one of Carlos's training sessions in Spain, the two of them laughing and playfully exchanging shots under the Mediterranean sun. A few days later, Carlos posted a cryptic Instagram story of a candlelit dinner. The internet sleuths did their thing, cross-referencing backgrounds, timestamps, and Emma's recent tagged locations. Bingo! Same place, same night. Coincidence? Please. Then came the real bombshell. A grainy, paparazzi-style video surfaced of them leaving a tournament party together, Carlos guiding Emma protectively through the flashing cameras. That was it. Game, set, match. The world had its confirmation. Overnight, their supposed romance was splashed across every sports headline. Some hailed them as tennis's new power couple, a dynamic duo who could dominate both on and off the court. Others, not so much. Critics, always ready to rain on any parade, warned that relationships within the sport were distractions. Carlos had dealt with media scrutiny since he was a teen. It was just another Tuesday for him. But for Emma, this was a whole new level of invasive. Ever since her shocking US Open win, she had battled the crushing weight of public expectation. And now, instead of dissecting her game, the world was obsessing over her personal life. But did they let the noise get to them? Not a chance. In a post-match interview, when a reporter jokingly brought up the speculation, Carlos smirked and played dumb, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Sure, buddy. Meanwhile, Emma handled it with her signature grace, shrugging off the gossip with a simple, "People will always talk. I'm just focused on my tennis." Class act. Still, the world wasn't buying it. Every move they made was under a microscope. Every glance, every interaction was analyzed like a crime scene. When Emma suffered a tough loss at Wimbledon, some critics immediately blamed the rumored relationship, claiming she was distracted. The pressure was suffocating. But Emma, she wasn't about to let the world define her. "I've been through worse," she told the press, her voice dripping with quiet defiance. Carlos had his own challenges. Balancing the grueling demands of the ATP Tour with a constant swirl of gossip was exhausting. But instead of letting it weigh him down, he played with even more fire, as if determined to prove that he could handle it all. The fame, the scrutiny, and yes, even love. As time went on, Their connection only seemed to grow stronger. They weren't the type to plaster their relationship all over social media or engage in over-the-top PDA. But those who knew them best could see it. The way Emma instinctively cheered for Carlos, the way he spoke about her with unmistakable fondness. There was an unspoken understanding between them, something real. Then came the moment that shut down any remaining doubters, the US Open. Both were competing, both chasing glory. Emma, after an absolute battle of a match, emerged victorious, drained but triumphant. As she walked off the court, she saw him waiting in the tunnel. And in that split second, with cameras flashing, Carlos reached for her hand. No grand gestures, no dramatics, just a simple, intimate sign of support. The world finally had its answer. But what truly stunned everyone wasn't just the confirmation, it was how they handled it. With maturity, with grace, with a laser focus on their careers. They weren't just another tabloid couple, another fleeting romance swallowed by the pressures of fame. They were two elite athletes who had found something rare, someone who understood, without words, the chaos and beauty of the journey. As months passed, the world slowly adjusted. The initial frenzy faded into quiet admiration. Somehow, against all odds, they had done the impossible. They had found a way to keep their private lives intact while thriving under the relentless glare of the spotlight. And in a sport where the margins between victory and defeat are razor thin, maybe, just maybe, having someone who truly gets you is the biggest win of all. Carlos Alcaraz and EMMA RADUCANU weren't just surviving the madness. They were thriving in it, racking up titles, smashing expectations, and proving to the world that love and ambition weren't mutually exclusive. Their story wasn't some cheesy, fairy tale romance. Hell no. It was about resilience, about finding balance in a world that constantly tried to pull them in opposite directions. They weren't just another high-profile couple destined to crumble under the weight of fame. They were a damn anomaly, a duo that had somehow defied the odds, showing that even in the cutthroat, pressure-cooker world of professional tennis, there was room for love, partnership, and something far deeper than clickbait headlines. The chemistry between them? Unquestionable. But they never needed grand declarations or flashy Instagram posts to prove a damn thing. Their relationship unfolded in the quiet moments, in the subtle gestures that spoke louder than any tabloid scoop ever could. Carlos was the kind of guy who played tennis like his life depended on every single point. Fierce, relentless, an absolute animal on the court. Off it, he had a warmth that very few people got to see. Emma, on the other hand, moved with an effortless grace, her words always carefully measured, her expression composed, almost unreadable. To the public, she was poised, elegant, even. But those who truly knew her had seen the sharp wit, the teasing edge, the side of her that very few could keep up with. That contrast was exactly what made them click. Carlos was pure fire, raw energy, instinct, a human highlight reel of passion. Emma, precision, strategy, a master chess player disguised as a tennis star. He played like a man on a mission. She played like she had already mapped out the entire game in her head. And yet, somehow, when they were together, they fit like pieces of a puzzle. In their training sessions in Spain, far away from the blinding camera flashes and the never-ending speculation, they allowed themselves to be just two young athletes who loved the game. Emma, a London girl through and through, was not built for the scorching Spanish summer. She would roll her eyes every time Carlos teased her about how quickly she melted under the heat. "You Brits are so damn delicate," he joked, smirking as she struggled through a particularly grueling drill. It only made her more determined to push through, refusing to let him have the last laugh. At first, their interactions were all playful banter, harmless jabs that always ended in laughter when one of them sent a ball flying way out of bounds. But as time went on, something shifted. Carlos started noticing the way Emma's expression changed when she was completely locked in, the way her fingers curled around the grip of her racket right before a crucial shot. And Emma, she started appreciating the effortless power in Carlos's game, the way his entire body adjusted mid-air to execute the perfect stroke. It wasn't just admiration, it was understanding. They both knew what it was like to carry the weight of expectations, to have every move scrutinized, to be judged not just for their performance on the court but for every single decision they made off it. Their dynamic was different. Carlos, always the extrovert, loved pulling Emma into new experiences. He took an almost ridiculous amount of joy in introducing her to Spanish food, watching with an amused grin as she hesitated before trying something unfamiliar. "Trust me," he'd say, sliding a plate of pulpo a la galega in front of her. She'd arch an eyebrow, but inevitably, she'd take a bite. And every single time, she'd flash that smug little smile when she had to admit it was actually pretty damn good. Emma, in turn, had a way of pulling out a different side of Carlos. The introspective one. The one that surfaced late at night, when training was over and exhaustion had settled in. Those were the moments where they sat in quiet corners of hotel lounges, talking about things they never shared with the outside world. Carlos would tell her about his childhood, about the dusty courts where he played barefoot because he didn't always have the right shoes. Emma would listen, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns on the table, before sharing her own struggles. The way the sudden fame after her US Open win had rattled her, the pressure to prove she wasn't just a one-hit wonder. With each conversation, they understood each other a little more. No judgment. No expectations. Just two people who could finally be themselves, away from all the noise. But, of course, the world wasn't about to let them have that privacy. Every tournament, every match, every damn glance they exchanged was dissected like it was part of some unsolved mystery. When Emma posted a casual morning coffee photo, fans zoomed in on the reflection in her spoon, convinced they could see Carlos lurking in the background. When Carlos pulled off a clutch win, the cameras always managed to capture Emma in the crowd. Her expression unreadable, but her presence undeniable. Some argued she was just supporting a fellow athlete. The ones who had been paying attention? They knew better. Then came the night that set the internet ablaze. The fateful tournament party where they got caught slipping. They had arrived separately, mingled with their own groups, done everything right to avoid unnecessary attention. But as the night wore on and the music softened, they somehow found themselves drifting toward each other. It wasn't planned. It never was. At some point, Carlos leaned in, voice low enough that only she could hear. "You do realize everyone is watching us, right?" he murmured, amusement flickering in his eyes. Emma exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking her head. Let them watch. And just like that, something shifted. Not between them, they had always been solid, but in how the world saw them. They were no longer just rising stars in tennis. They were Carlos and Emma, a story people wanted to believe in. Yet, despite the endless chatter, they remained unfazed. Beneath the headlines, the speculation, the theories spun by overzealous fans, they were still just two athletes who understood each other in a way no one else could. Two people who, despite the chaos surrounding them, had somehow found a rare pocket of calm in the middle of the storm. The air inside the party was thick with the scent of champagne, expensive cologne, and that polished elegance only the tennis elite could pull off. The biggest names in the sport, past and present, milled about in clusters, exchanging polite nods, strategic handshakes, and laughter that was measured just enough to sound genuine. But despite the grandeur of it all, Carlos and Emma felt oddly detached from the spectacle. They weren't here for the glitz, the networking, or the unspoken rivalries disguised as pleasantries. They were here for each other. And, as it turned out, that was the only thing that really mattered. Carlos had never been one for these kinds of events. He showed up because he had to, shake a few hands, pose for some photos, keep the sponsors happy. But truth be told, he'd rather be sweating it out on a tennis court than standing beneath the pretentious glow of crystal chandeliers. Tonight, though, something was different. There was an ease to his posture, a looseness in his stance. His usual nervous energy, the restless habit of tapping his fingers or shifting his weight, was absent. Instead, his hands stayed tucked in the pockets of his perfectly tailored suit, exuding a nonchalance that wasn't entirely forced. Emma, on the other hand, was a master of these occasions. She moved through the crowd with that effortless grace that had made her a sensation beyond the tennis world, dressed in something understated yet commanding, the kind of look that didn't demand attention. It just got it. She exchanged polite smiles and empty pleasantries with a few familiar faces, but no matter where she wandered in the room, her gaze always seemed to drift back to him. It wasn't obvious, not at first, but for those paying close attention, the signs were there. That quiet awareness between them, the way their eyes would catch across the room for just a second too long before flicking away. It was the kind of connection that didn't need words, just moments. Carlos, stuck in an utterly tedious conversation with a retired champion who apparently had a burning need to recount every match he played in the 90s, let his gaze wander. That's when he saw her, standing by the bar, fingers absently tracing the rim of her glass, head tilted slightly in that way that told him something. Someone was amusing her. His lips quirked before he even realized he was moving. His feet closed the distance without permission, drawn by some invisible force he had long since stopped questioning. By the time he reached her side, Emma turned to him, her expression giving away nothing. Not surprise, not expectation. Just that usual calm curiosity. "You looked like you needed saving," he murmured, leaning in just enough so that only she could hear him over the ambient hum of the party. Emma arched an eyebrow, setting her drink down with unhurried precision. "And you assumed you were the hero in this scenario?" Carlos grinned. "Maybe I just needed an excuse to escape my conversation." Emma smirked. "And here I was thinking you enjoyed debating match stats from a decade ago." Carlos let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "You have no idea." They fell into an easy rhythm. Sharp banter, teasing remarks, the kind of effortless exchange that only came with true understanding. For all their differences, his fire, her composure, they shared a thread of commonality. Both had been thrust into the spotlight too soon, expected to navigate a world that examined their every move under a microscope. At one point, a photographer subtly shifted their lens toward them, sensing the potential for an exclusive moment. Carlos caught it immediately. In one smooth, almost instinctive motion, he adjusted his stance, subtly angling himself in a way that shielded Emma from the direct view of the camera. She noticed. Of course, she noticed. A flicker of amusement passed through her eyes. Something unspoken exchanged between them. A silent acknowledgement. Maybe even appreciation. "You're getting good at this," she murmured. Carlos tilted his head slightly, his gaze flicking toward the photographer before meeting hers again. "I learn fast." Emma shrugged, fingers drumming idly against the bar. "I've had practice." Carlos exhaled, a knowing smile playing at his lips. "Yeah, me too." There was weight behind those words, one neither of them expanded on. The weight of expectation, of pressure, of always having to perform, not just on the court, but off it, too. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It wasn't uncomfortable. It just was. Then, because Carlos was always the one to break the quiet, he let out a short laugh. "You know they're probably making up stories about us right now." Emma smirked, that lazy, knowing smile of hers. "Let them." That caught him off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because of how effortlessly she said it. No hesitation. No concern over what people might think. Just certainty. Carlos studied her for a moment before nodding, as if they'd reached some kind of unspoken agreement. To an outsider, they might have looked like just two tennis players having a casual conversation at a party. But those who were truly paying attention, those who knew how to read between the lines, saw it. The way their body language was subtly aligned, the way their banter carried an undercurrent of something unspoken. And so, while the rest of the room buzzed with speculation, whispers, and stolen glances, Carlos and Emma remained in their own little space, unaffected by the noise. Because, in that moment, none of it mattered. Not the cameras. Not the headlines. Not the inevitable wave of questions waiting for them tomorrow. Just them. In a world that rarely let them be anything other than athletes, somehow finding something real amid the spectacle.